Hi, Lauren.
Hello.
Thank you for meeting with us. So this is an interview for the Global Conscious Leadership Meets Power group. And I'm so excited to be interviewing someone from the Stanford LEAD program. So thank you for taking time.
Of course, happy to.
And congratulations on your new position that you just started at Roblox.
Thank you.
So we're going to organize this around this experience that you're having, which is something that we all experience at some point, which is creating a culture with a new team and adjusting a culture as we join it. Something that's on my mind because I recently interviewed someone and they were talking about how they approach things. And it's one thing to approach it when you're building something from scratch. It's another thing when you're joining something that already exists. So can you start out by sharing a little bit about how you're navigating that process of building or evolving your team's culture at Roblox?
Sure. Yeah, I agree. It's a really interesting challenge, especially given remote work. And, Roblox is currently all remote. We haven't returned to office. And furthermore, I'm going to continue remote. I was hired to work virtually from Seattle, where our headquarters is in the Bay Area. So I think we're going to see more and more of this, across multiple industries where there's a remote workforce and managers who have to quickly, onboard to an inherited team and do that while, not having the luxury of that face-to-face time, which can really help to, create camaraderie and foster like team cohesion. So this is something I'm thinking a lot about. And ultimately, what I see as my job right now is just listening. I am on a listening tour, meeting with my team very frequently, meeting with every single team member, included those that aren't, directly reporting to me. And I've really tried to, make a concerted effort to, in my first exchange with, team members, share what my expectations are about being upfront and, sharing as much as possible in terms of feedback and kind of establishing what my philosophy is about, having open and honest dialogue. I kind of see it as an opportunity where in the past I've been promoted up through a team. And it's a little bit harder to set that expectation. And from my perspective, when you go from an individual contributor to a manager role versus coming in fresh. So I am actually seeing it as an opportunity to kind of reset, expectations and how people perceive me as a manager.
And what are some of the ways that you want to show up with this new team?
That's an excellent question. So something that is very important to me as part of my core values is compassion. It's something that you and I have spent a little bit of time talking about, where I come from the school of empathy. I'm a very, very empathetic individual. And I think some of that taps into my background as a creative writer. I studied creative writing, and as part of that practice, you are really trained on how to think about other people's perspective and what they're experiencing, because it's all part of building a believable character in your writing. And so I think that's done something to me psychologically, that now when I meet somebody for the first time, I'm very much thinking about what are their motivations, what keeps them up at night, all of the things that attribute to a well-rounded character and a narrative, but I'm applying that in the real world. And with that comes a lot of empathy, because you start thinking a lot about all of the unique, context that an individual is bringing to the table. And so I think that it's you and I talked about this, it's a double-edged sword to be, highly empathetic, because it can be both a very beneficial thing. It can help to establish trust quickly, and for people to feel like they're listened to. And I feel like I have benefited throughout my career as a manager that my team members share very openly with me. And sometimes I hear from other managers that are like, I just can't get useful information from my team. And I feel like they give me a ton of information about their personal and professional lives. But on the other hand, it can be very difficult for me to deliver very direct feedback, and to embody like a kind of be an authoritative figure in some ways. So that's my weak spot, and it's why I have kind of branded my empathetic value as compassion.
So we've talked a little bit about how compassion can be used to tap into that authoritative and constructive feedback mode, because compassion is at its essence a desire for that other person to be successful and to be their best self. And in order to get there, they need accurate inputs about themselves, and they need to be stretched. And so you inspired me in when you were sharing about your values during our group, because you talked about how you see feedback being the most compassionate thing you can do, as opposed to letting people be operating at a lower level and kind of staying in their comfort zone. Can you talk a little bit about how you got to that point in your mindset?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I echo everything you said right there. That is a large part, the reason why I've kind of tried to move away from empathy to compassion. And that was inspired. That's not something I came up with, by the way. Kim Scott, the author of Radical Candor, is very explicit about that in her book, where empathy can lead to what she calls ruinous empathy. And that really triggered something in me. When I read that, I was like, oh yeah, I've been there, done that. I get it. And so, throughout my career as a manager, I've seen, I've had a number of employees reporting to me whom, had performance weaknesses. And like a writer, I was crafting their narrative and kind of coming up with reasons why for that behavior, right? I would say, well, it's maybe because of this, or maybe because of that. And then I would put myself in kind of a, go down a rabbit hole where, instead of delivering that feedback in real time and getting them to share why something was happening from their own perspective, I was creating the rationale in my own mind and not giving them the opportunity to do so. And it made it way more difficult further down the line, if that, the performance continued, if whatever attribute it was about their work wasn't improving, it would reach a point where I was like, okay, at this point, I need to address it head on. And at that point, it was almost too little too late, right? That behavior or characteristic of their work was pervasive. And then it made it much more difficult to remedy. And it also, it was setting them up for failure from my perspective. And so, yeah, that was really it for me. It was kind of an aha moment when I encountered that in Kim Scott's writing, but also just reflecting upon my own experience with a number of direct reports that, I should have been more honest up front and had more of a dialogue surrounding their performance, instead of creating my own story about why something was happening.
So have you had to reconstruct your way of building trust with people on your team because of this shift? Because in my experience, by approaching people in an extremely curious way, you drop the judgment that they feel coming from you. And that's one of the things that helps them to open up. However, if we then are going to come and say, that actually isn't in your best interest for me to not be giving you any feedback, now it can be construed as judgment coming towards them, which causes them to shut down more towards us and not share as openly. So how are you addressing that?
Yeah, I think you're spot on though. Like curiosity is definitely a powerful tool to help remedy this. Like asking a lot of questions up front instead of making statements, right? So when you're in a, conversation where you may have to deliver that tough feedback, first going about it by seeking additional information and input from the person on the receiving end. Asking them to help you to understand, why something is happening, and framing. I've found that, coming in with questions and with that curious mindset can really help to foster a conversation. And that's really what what I am striving for in those situations, is to understand. It's not that I want to do away with my approach of like having a deep understanding of what makes my direct reports tick and having a narrative about who they are. I still want that, but I don't want to do it in my own head. I need to find ways to actually get them to contribute to the holistic picture that I'm trying to paint. And so now it's kind of like flipping all my training that I had as a writer. Instead of like, okay, I'm creating this in my own mind, I'm actually, this is a gift, right? I have the ability to talk to these quote unquote characters and understand what their motivations are and have them share that with me firsthand. So yeah, it actually, I agree with you that curiosity is one of your number one tools for that. It's, acting as somebody who really cares by asking questions, and sometimes pointed questions, to, help understand where that person's coming from.
Let's jump into the school of thought that one of the ways to build trust and openness is to be open yourself. And I recently interviewed someone who talked about how their method for this is that when they don't have the answers, or when they don't have a certain skill that's needed, they share that with their team, and they create a space for someone within the team to rise up and fill that. How do you feel about being vulnerable yourself with your team, and how are you doing that in this new position, if so?
I love that. I'm sorry, I just had a notification go off. I hope you couldn't hear that. But yeah, it's an excellent point. And it's something that I have to do in my new role. Because if I came in trying to pretend like I knew everything about the company culture, and Roblox is a very unique company in the technology space. And I come from, 15 years of traditional game development, and Roblox has some aspects of what their, developers are doing, are building games, but that's not everything. And their development community is very, very unique. And so it's challenging a lot of my preconceived notions of what, who developers are and what they do and how they do things. And so I've had to come in with almost a blank slate. Really, it's that different, where I have to just kind of wipe my mind of all the knowledge that I've had and start from scratch and just learn. And so it's awesome. It's a great challenge for me right now, because I'm definitely of like a growth mindset and learning mindset at the moment. But yeah, it all boils down to, like, again, that listening tour, talking to my team members, learning from them, with the hope that over time that I have the additional context and information that I need to be effective in my role. But yeah, I definitely didn't step into the role with all of the knowledge that I need to be effective. So it's a vulnerable place to be.
And do you see that as a gift potentially? Because now you're able to have a context to create trust with them, where you're not pretending that you know everything. You're instead showing them how to be vulnerable about their internal insecurities and gaps, which can oftentimes, if we cover them up, blow up into where the problems exist for business.
Absolutely. I do. I consider it a gift from that perspective. I also, my role is head of operations for community, which means that I'm setting up programs and, methods to help connect our developer community to different opportunities within the developer relation group that I'm part of. And with operations, like I've found throughout my career that the secret kind of special sauce for operations and being effective is having the ability to really know enough about many different facets of the business to be effective. And it's really about listening and understanding other stakeholders' objectives, and then aligning on a solution that factors in sometimes very disparate and conflicting objectives and goals. And so actually, it is a gift that I'm starting from fresh, because it allows me an opportunity to come in and just ask a lot of questions and collect a ton of information, and then parse that together and hear if I'm getting different messages from this stakeholder versus that stakeholder, or this team member versus that team member. So that in itself is a gift, because I think it will allow me to come up with solutions, with a fresh perspective. I also think that not knowing everything as a manager is a good way to ensure that you are kept at the right altitude, so you can function as a manager and, handle that aspect of your job, but also to think more strategically and operate at a little bit more of a remove, where by comparison, in my previous role, I was promoted from within. So I went from being an individual contributor to a manager. And it was very difficult for me for probably the first year or so in that role to re-architect my workload and to delegate off some of the responsibility that I had to my team members, because it was just, you're so in the trenches.
Love that. Well, I'm not going to assume that I know the answer to this next question. What has been the opportunity that you're most grateful for over the past 2 years? And how did you make the most of it?
Oh, goodness. The opportunity that I've been most grateful for, well, I've got to say this new job. It's checking so many boxes and coming at like this very perfect time in my life where I was looking for something new. And I also, this isn't me just singing Stanford's praises, but it was a direct correlation to the power class, the Power to Lead course that I took, because there was a whole module in that course focused on your brand. What's your personal brand? And I hadn't given that a lot of thought. So it really forced me to reflect on my career, where I had come from, and what again, with the narrative, but as a writer, I can't stop myself. What is my narrative? What was the through line of my career? And it taught me some really valuable lessons and made me realize like what direction I wanted to go with my career. And then the next module was about networking and how to tap into your existing network. And so I had a conversation with Roblox way back in December with a former colleague of mine, and then the company went IPO and I didn't hear back from anybody, and I was disappointed. And my previous self, prior to taking this course, would have just let it go and chalked it up to, it's not a good fit, I'm going to move on and look for another opportunity. But instead, this course taught me like reconnect with your network and just make an ask and see what happens, kind of get over yourself, and put yourself out there. So I did. I reconnected with my colleague who had reached out to me back in December. And I said, hey, look, like, I'm just wanted to let it be known that I'm still interested in Roblox, but it's not even about the opportunity. I just want to stay connected with you on a personal level because I really admire you. And he came back near immediately and said, you know what? I created a role that's perfect for you. Let's talk. So I was just flabbergasted. I was like, this is magic. And so, yeah, I really do attribute what I'm doing now in large part to that course and my following the coursework.
That's lovely. I would, so to summarize, you took what you learned in that course to look at your narrative and develop it into something that helped you to see that you're ready to move on and try something new. And then it inspired how you went about networking, and it helped to give you this new approach to dropping the ego and being resilient when it comes to whatever you're going after, not taking things personally, but instead just staying focused on a general vision for the future.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that the piece about coming up with your brand, and in my case, what I discovered was what I really love and I'm passionate about is connecting creative individuals or teams to opportunity. I really love helping others make their dreams a reality. And it comes from me not being super successful as a creative writer and not having, at the time that I was trying to write screenplays and pitch them around Hollywood, I didn't have the business acumen that would allow me to be successful. So in hindsight, reflecting back on what was actually quite a negative experience in my early career, it's really served as a catalyst for me to help others to be successful and to move obstacles out of their way. And so in my current role in service of the developer community on Roblox, that's why I think Roblox saw me as a good fit, because they know that I'm coming from that place of compassion and really understanding what makes creatives tick. And if I hadn't had the course at Stanford that made me think about that narrative, I wouldn't have put that out there. But I led with that in my interview with nearly everybody that I talked to. I said, you know, this is me. This is the context of where I'm coming from. And I think they like that. So it was a good fit. And it's also awesome because it's also a reflection of my values. And so the fact that they liked that and hired me based on me being authentic about what I care about means that the opportunity is more aligned with my values too.
That is so rich. Well, thank you, Lauren. And we can do it again. I have some ideas for a panel that would bring some of the conscious leadership experts to talk with some leaders and maybe like 6 people. And maybe you'll be interested in doing that. I have you starred as someone who would be awesome.
Well, thank you so much. I'd love that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. And have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thanks, Tierney. You too. Bye.